Welcome to Running in the 70s, where we interview, meet, and get to know athletes of all kind who were running in the 70s. I'm your host, Matthew 𝐑𝐮𝐬𝐭. Today on the podcast, we're back in Pennsylvania with a historic runner that some people away from the area might not be familiar with because of when his career ended. We know the names of the famous runners of the era like Prefontaine, Craig Virgin, and this guy was in those races and beat those runners in many cases. So we're going to talk about a legend from the Philadelphia area. It started out in Illinois. Welcome today on the podcast, David Merrick.
Matt, happy to be with you.
Dave, let's frame this starting origin story. When, where, and how did you first get into competitive running?
Back in high school, freshman year, everybody had to go out for a sport. So all my friends went out for football. I was a slight guy, so I went out, got hit one time, and I said, I'm going to pick a different sport. Saw the cross country team guys go by, so I hopped in with them and just started chasing them. It actually transitioned pretty easily. The running program at Lincoln Way High School was just getting started at that time. And so I trained with these guys. And the first day that we went out for a run, he said, here, just keep up with the guys. So I ran with the varsity guys and chased them and stayed up with them the entire way. So the coach, he looks at me and goes, okay, let's see what you can do. And I started training with the varsity ever since.
Great. What year was that? And then where exactly in Illinois is that school?
It's about 30 miles outside of Chicago. It's out towards the Joliet area. Lockport, Mokena, Frankfort. It was in New Lenox, was where the high school was.
Okay. What year was your freshman year?
I think 1967. I graduated in 71.
Okay. The first run, what were you wearing on your feet, and what did you have on your feet as the season progressed?
I was a pair of basketball sneakers. I remember because the coach looked and goes, you might want to buy a better pair of running shoes. I think they had, I forgot what they were called. They were the old blue suede running shoes, and the folks took me out to the athletic store and got them, and that was it. We didn't run in spikes, so we ran in flats.
Yeah, and what was the distance of the varsity races?
2.5 miles.
Okay. You did progress, and I know that the training that you guys ran a lot of mileage early, age 14, 15, 16, 17, mileage increased. How did the coach drive that or incentivize that heavy mileage?
We had a different coach. So we had a cross country coach. I've forgotten his name at this point. And Coach Rodriguez was the track running coach. So coach, over the wintertime, we didn't have a running program. So he started a polar bear program. So our goal over the summertime, over the wintertime, was to run 600 miles over the winter months.
And snow hit there back in those days?
It snows, but it's really windy. So you were battling both elements, the snow itself and then also the wind.
You were on the varsity right away.
I was.
Did you do your polar bear and summer running alone or with your teammates?
I was very fortunate. I had two teammates that I trained with all the time. Al Carlson was a year in front of me, lived in my same town. Al ran every mile with me. It was interesting because I'd always wonder, and we were two different performing. I loved race day. It always intrigued me that here's a guy that was quicker than I was, but here's a guy that trained with me all the time. My freshman year, I think I ran 10 minutes for 2 miles, and Al was 11 plus. My sophomore year was down to, I think, 9:15, and Al was way back over 10 minutes. It was always intrigued me that here was a guy that spent every mile with me, but had a different race perspective.
That time at the end of the 60s and going into the 70s, America was having some great, prodigious high school runners. Were you aware, and now that you made the switch across country and we're on the varsity and getting a letter and everything, were you aware of the runners, and were you watching the Olympics and some of these guys role models yet?
I began to follow running a lot more closely. Jerry Lindgren was the leading high schooler at that time. Prefontaine followed right after him. And then I was 4 years right behind Pre. But Jim Ryan and then Marty LaCory were big fellows during that period.
Let's go ahead and talk a little bit about your track career in high school. You were a multiple state champion, a 2-event winner I know you did some spectacular times. And how did you strategize running two races? When I went to school in Western Pennsylvania a little bit after you, while I was running, they made the transition that someone running the 2 mile could run another event. Earlier, when you were there, you could run both events, the mile and the 2.
My senior year was the first year. My junior year, you could not. So 1970,
Okay.
1971, that was the first year that you could double in a distance race. You could run a 1.5 mile, but if you ran the 2 mile, you were done for the day. They wouldn't even let you run the mile relay.
Wow. Did you lose any races your senior year on the track?
No.
Yeah.
The state track meet was a interesting perspective because Coach and I talked about it. I ran against Craig Virgin in the 2 mile and then Mike Durkin to come back and run the mile. And Mike was the much more difficult competitor. Craig was a sophomore at the time, so it wasn't a real apples to apples scenario. So my coach and I thought it through and said, do I want to try to set the national record in the 2 mile or just go for a win in the 2 mile again and rest up for the mile? So I ran Craig. He led the first 6 laps of the 2 mile. I took off the last half mile. I ran 8:48, and Craig, he was the first sophomore to break 9 minutes. He ran 8:58 at that time. Then I had to come back an hour, 10 minutes later and run against Durkin in the mile. So I ran 4:07.8, and Mike was right behind me.
What was the track like and the weather like that day?
That was at the University of Illinois. That was on a tartan. It was an all-weather track.
Okay. Tell me about that discussion. How long of a process was it that you're not going to try to set the national record, which was maybe within your reach? That's a pretty big apple to pass up.
After the state meet, we had 2 more pretty significant meets. I'm going against, I think it's Tom Hale from California. I was going to race against him 2 weeks later. So we sat there and strategized that Mike Durkin was a pretty fierce competitor. I had not run against him earlier in the year, but he was right about the same times as I was, and he was faster. So it was one of those strategizing pieces of, one, I wasn't going to go into it fresh, but I wanted to go into it knowing that I was going to have to go from 400 yards out, tire his legs out.
All right. Were you a good student in school, academic?
Yes, National Honor Society.
Okay, so how did recruiting go? When you put those kind of times down, obviously you're going to hear from a lot of schools, and you went to Pennsylvania, and also there's a bunch of choices down in that corner of Pennsylvania.
It was interesting. I got recruited by a lot of schools. So I looked at Kansas because Jim Ryan was there. I looked at Oregon because Prefontaine was there. I looked at Washington State because Jerry Blingram went there. And got recruited by Jumbo Elliott at Villanova. Wound up, I actually signed with Villanova to go there. It was an interesting story. I signed with them, and then I never heard from them again. So this was in December, January, whatever it was. And I planned on going to Villanova. Company was from Penn was late at the game, really started recruiting me or just contacting me during the indoor season. And then I met him for the first time. I talked with him on the phone and by mail. I met him at the indoor AAUs in New York. Was the first time I had met him. And he invited me down. He said, why don't you come down and take a look at the University of Pennsylvania? I was a pretty good academic student, and Penn's in the Ivy League. So going to the Wharton School made a lot of sense.
Okay. Jumbo, next time you saw Jumbo, what did he say? Hey, what happened?
I saw them at the outdoor AAUs. I ran 3 miles out in Oregon that year. And that was the next time that I saw him. And I had not been contacted by anybody from Villanova after I signed with them. So I'm not sure if they were surprised when I didn't show up or when I went to Penn.
Yeah. Okay.
So Tup was the assistant coach at Villanova under Jumbo Elliott. So they were pretty good friends. So that created a little friction between those two.
Yeah, they may have had some discussions before that you meet. Yeah.
Yes.
All right, you got there, and it was a great time for running. You had national caliber cross country teams, both at Villanova and at Penn. Let's talk about your mileage in high school. You had gotten up to some pretty significant mileage for a miler. Looking at today's mileage, what were you running in high school before we get to Penn?
I think my junior year, I started doing doubles. So putting in 4 5 miles in the morning before school, and then regular distance runs after school. Freshman year, it was 500-600 miles to be in the Polar Bear Club. We were up to about 1,200 miles over the wintertime, my junior and senior years training. We didn't have indoor track, but we would go up to Chicago where they had an indoor facility and we would train and race there.
When you decided to go to Penn, what was the summer training and communication? How'd you prepare for your freshman year at Penn?
Backing up one, I chose Penn because one, it was a great academic institution. They had a great running program. Julio Piazza, Carl Thornton, Elton Fikes. So they had a really strong running program because people looked at, why'd you go to Penn? I'm going, they had great athletes. They had Bruce Collum, who was a Olympic hurdler. You had Fred Samara, who was an Olympic decathlon. They had Tom Blair, phenomenal pole vaulter. They had a wonderful track program. It's transitioned from 3 miles to 5 miles in cross country. So I began up my miles to probably 90, 95. And then it was right around 100. They had a cross country camp before school, and we were running over 100 miles a week.
What did you study at Penn?
Business economics. I wound up in the college instead of business school. So it was marketing and accounting.
Okay, so this is 1971, 72. What's the transition like when you go to Penn? It's a smaller school compared to giant universities across the country. Getting a roommate, integrating with the cross country team, and the status of varsity cross country and track on campus. What was about all that scenario when you landed?
My freshman year at Penn was the first year in collegiate running that freshmen could run on varsity.
Yeah.
And again, it was Penn had a really strong running program. So we would all meet in the morning and go off for a 6-7 mile run every morning.
And what was the coach relationship? You changed coaches in high school. By the time you graduated, you'd gone through another track coach?
Coach Rodriguez was my first track coach. He took over the football program. So Al Logston was my cross country and then track distance coach in high school.
He was the one that strategized with you to win 2 events and not go for time. Let's just visit that one more. You didn't lose any races.
Right.
Were you running for time when you're multiple events in some of these meets where you're just scoring points? Were you blasting out to win? Were you running for time? Or how'd that work?
Pretty much both. We had a really strong track program. Went from being competitors to we were conference champs every year from my sophomore year on. I was fortunate in that I had some really strong teammates to chase. So I had Al Davis and 880 was a 153, 152 half miler along with Rick Laux. Steve Mangum was a 415, 420 miler. So I had really good teammates to train with. Again, I ran every mile with Al Carlson, who was probably a 10:30 2-mile.
Now, what was the transition like to a whole new group of guys that you're chasing with and a new coach? How'd that go?
It was a transition because I was really very close with Al Logston and Joe Rodriguez. Strategized with them on races. It was interesting because people would ask you what type of race strategy would you use. I ran hard pretty much every race. I broke 9 minutes 18 times, 19 times my senior year. Pretty much every 2 miles, right around 9 minutes or right under it.
Yeah. Wow.
And it was called just tempo running because coach would say strategize on what pace to run. And coach was very adamant about you run at race pace. If somebody's going to beat you, they're going to have to beat you.
Yeah. Some of these teammates and guys you had to run with, I guess you'd encounter them in college later, Mangan and these guys that were that moved around. And you had great success. Let's talk about that freshman year team. Who were some of the names on that team? And you guys did really well.
We finished 3rd in the nation. Carl Thornton and Julio Piazza were the captains of that team. Then Bob Childs was a year in front of me. He wound up winning the Heps the next year. Elliot Rogers was a senior. Elton Fikes was on that team, and Jim Rafferty from New York was on that team as well. It was interesting because we had people on the team who had scored in the Heps the year before that didn't even make that team that year. That's how deep the team became.
So it was just moving around. There wasn't a giant freshman class. How many freshmen were there apart from you on the final NCAA?
I was the only freshman on that team. Yeah.
So it was movement within the team. Wow.
And I was extremely fortunate because Carl and Julio were great team leaders. We ran as a pack in races, and I was really fortunate in terms of transitioning from high school running to competing at a pretty high level, collegiate level. We ran as a group. I think we tied for the first 5 or 6 meets. We just ran as a blob, a group of tadpoles running along.
Yeah. Back then they used to let you do that. And
Right.
then,
It's interesting because in the heptagonal championships, we scored 18 points.
wow.
I won. Rojas from Cornell finished second, and then Penn got the next 5, 6 spots.
Yeah.
That's how deep
What-
the team was.
I want to jump to something. You were this great distance running cross country team, and this I like it. When you broke the school record on the track, it was several years later, but you smashed it. You broke it by nearly a minute. Was that your speed improvement? An outlier that you broke a record that then stood for 30 some years, but you were a pack runner, and you guys weren't that far separated at the beginning. When you joined the team and ran cross country, you were seconds apart, man, 1 to 5.
There's 5 years in between there. So my freshman year was 1971. I graduated in 1976. I was injured and took a year off. We ran as a pack my freshman year. I ran solo after my junior year and then senior year.
Okay. With this kind of Ironman constitution in high school of all these miles, you finally met some difficulties and got injured. I'd like to hear the story of how you dealt with it. And you had to make some big decisions, and you're a young man at that point facing a lot of things and people telling you, let's cut you open and all this other stuff. How did you face that? And what was the timing, all that?
It's interesting because as a runner, I look at folks and you just kind of wonder why people didn't enjoy running and something else. When you're injured, running is a really difficult sport. I found that out my freshman year after cross country. I broke down in indoor track. And I think it was partly to do with where I went to school. Penn is in Philadelphia, and it was running on a concrete city. Shoe technology at that time was not that good. So I think that impaired a lot of injuries at that time. I never let them do major knee surgery. I allowed them to do orthoscopic surgery. Rudy Schmidt did it, I think, 5 times on me. They go in and do scrapings and what have you. They wanted to go in and take out some cartilage, and they said, I'm not doing major surgery on it, because they could never tell me why they had to do them, why they had to. So it's in the way. So that's not good enough for me. So I'd always just wait and heal naturally. Well, I was lucky for the Philadelphia area. My senior year, I was running about 110 plus miles a week out on the bridle paths, out on the Wissahickon Drive. It's just a crushed cinder. And it was ideal training area.
Let's go through your seasons, because they weren't consecutive. Over 5 years, you had a mix of missed seasons, missed entire years.
I didn't make a complete season until my senior year. So in 1971, I won the Hep cross country. In 1973, I won the Hep cross country. And then 1975. So every other year, I'd stay healthy enough to run. I'd run cross country and I'd break down right afterwards. I should have been smart enough to realize that I'd stay healthy in cross country because I'd go home or I'd go someplace else to train and I wasn't training on concrete. So I'd come back in great shape and then I just gradually begin to break down. And then I met Dr. Schuster up in New York. It was funny because we went to, I forgot the fellow's name. Coach Tuppeny took me to a cardiologist who was a runner in Red Bank, New Jersey. Went to see him and he says, I've got somebody I want you to go see up in New York, and I want you to go see Dr. Schuster. So we're going to see this doctor in Red Bank, New Jersey. I said, Tupp, why are we seeing a cardiologist? He goes, he's a pretty smart, he's an older fellow, he's a runner and something else, and he has some ideas. And sure enough, he sent me up to see Dr. Schuster, and that straightened my knee problems out with orthotics.
The hard orthotics.
They weren't. They were. I still have them. They're leather with the foam underneath them.
All right. Wow. Let's talk about any change in your racing approach then, with knowing your competition. Seems to me in high school, you just said, I'm going to run and they're going to have to beat me. Is that the way it's stated? And you're going to run into Villanova a lot, IC4As. You're going to run into them. And you ran some great races and course records at Belmont, Van Courtlandt, but you're running into these guys. And how much in your head was the race planning? Did that change from high school? Were you looking at people and their abilities, or were you still just running into the ground?
It changed a little bit because you're racing 5 miles. So you just don't go out and pound away at 5 miles. But the philosophy stayed pretty much the same. I go out and put the hammer down and put pressure on the race through 2 3 miles. And at 3 miles, almost every race, I just pick the pace up and say, okay, who's going to go? And very few did.
Yeah. Once you got to nationals and the championship races, I guess you'd see some of your old
My old teammates.
idols and
My
your
senior
old
year, I ran
rivals
against
from.
Craig. My senior year at Penn State, I ran against Craig Version. I'd love to run that race again. Not strategy or anything else. I got a side ache. It was interesting because we didn't eat until, I think the meet was like at 10 o'clock, but we didn't eat until we had a late breakfast. And I should have known. I should not have eaten. I just skipped it and what have you. Took the race out. Same thing, 3 miles, picked it up. There was just Craig Virgin, Nick Rose, and myself. Broke away from the pack. And at 3.5 miles, I was going to put a surge in. Instead of putting a surge in, I was doubled over with a side ache. I mean, it stayed for a half a mile. So I went from being in the lead to about 25th. Just as quickly as it came, it went away. So I finished strong. It finished 9th. But I think it would have been a different race had it not had a side ache. So.
Did you talk to those two, Nick Rose and Craig, after the
I
race?
talked with Craig afterwards. He go, "Where'd you go?" I was right with him. And Craig looks at me and I doubled over, cussed and said something and told him to go ahead and run well. I saw him at the end. He goes, "Where'd you go?" And I said, had a side ache.
Yeah. The records that you set, the times that you're running, like your school record in the 10K lasted for many decades, and Van Courtlandt Park and Belmont Plateau records that you set. You had a spectacular senior year.
Especially cross country.
What was that break between junior 73 and 75? Was it the same breakdown and psychological? What did you think? It's happened again. How did you process that?
Same knee injury. And again, surgically, it wasn't going to fix it. The transition to my senior year, I found the Wissahickon bridle pass. So my senior summer, I was putting in 110 miles. I drive out every day and run anywhere up from 12 to 18 miles. And it's a unique path because every half mile there's a marker. So yeah, I was flying along at a 5:30 training pace all the time.
How'd the coaches handle this? That you're making decisions. You're a young man, but it's your body and your decisions, and you're going to drop out of the team, and that happens in every sport with every team. How did that work with the coaches? And you had to leave campus.
It was interesting because I think it drove Tup nuts. Here he is. He has this huge asset on his team that every other year he runs for him. So I knew I frustrated him quite. And it wasn't something I could control. It was just something that we had to deal with.
The interesting thing of you said, I love running, but when I'm hurt, it's one of the worst things to have is your passion. How did that affect you in any other ways? And how'd your academics go through these ups and downs?
I left for a year because of that. And running this was a huge part of my life. And so not to be able to do it really did influence it. My dad and then Stanley Johnson was the Reverend at Penn, helped me through it a lot because both of them said the same thing. He said, "You're a runner, but you're going to have academics the rest of your life. So you're going there to get a degree," which is why I picked Penn in the first place.
Yeah. Stanley Johnson, was he involved in the recruiting?
I got a really interesting scenario. Stanley was the Reverend, the university chaplain. I had one of those light bulb jobs in college for my work study job was working with Stanley. I'll come back to that. Tup really didn't start recruiting me till indoor track at the AU meet up in New York. And then he started showing up at some of my meets, and you're only allowed 1 or 2 home visits or something at that time. So the final official Penn visit was Stanley Johnson. So Tup gets to know my family pretty well. And I came from a pretty religious family. So they sent Stanley out as the final contact to meet with my parents and say, "You're going to give us a young man and I'll make him a man at the end of this." So they send the chaplain out to visit my parents. And that's really who talked me into going to Penn.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I'm going to talk a couple for you races. You've had a lot of wins, a lot of records. If somebody says, what was a race that taught you something, or what was the most satisfying that you think you mastered it? What are a couple of your favorite races on either end of good or, boy, that taught me a lesson races?
Cross country was my favorite race. I love that. I love that season. One, because I trained for it. Track's a different animal. The racing philosophy is a little bit different. Cross country, there's hills and you're running all over countryside and what have you. There's a lot of opportunity to put some paint on somebody when you're out on a cross country course. On the track, it's just a flat oval, so the tactics are much, much different. So my favorite races, I would say, would have been cross country. And one, at my senior year, I had trained so well that I controlled the race tempo. I ran some phenomenal times, but I was in control of it the entire time. I had some teammates that we put the same miles in. Ken Poskett, who was a Canadian, was funny because he just sat there and said, I train with you every day. So I'm just, from the beginning of a race, I'm going to go out with you, and I'm just going to go as long as I can. So Kenny takes off with me. I forgot what, I think it was the Big 5 race. Ken goes off and takes off with me. And we went off in 4:40. And then next mile, we pick it up a little bit more. And Kenny messed it about a mile and a half and then gave up. I don't even think he finished the race. And he just goes, you've got a different gear. Something's going on different. It's interesting.
Yeah. In track, though, you did get to run in front of the home team in Nationals at Franklin Field. You got the host Nationals. Does that make any difference?
28:49 for 10,000 meters, which was a good time. But I think had I run 10,000 in the cross country season, I would have been under 28 minutes. I was in phenomenal shape in cross country. That wound up being my last race. I had broken down again with knee problems again, and was probably only training 35, 40 miles a week at that point. Wow. You said you've qualified for the Olympic trials. Would you like to go? And I said, I'm done. My body's not taking anymore. And that was mentally, I closed the chapter on running at that time too.
What happened to that competitive drive? It wasn't a choice. It wasn't like, I don't want to compete anymore. What happens to that?
I actually thought about going into coaching. And it's interesting because it's running and coaching are two different animals, mindset wise. And there's a philosophy and a training philosophy in terms of coaching, but I wanted to step away from running. And so I did. I just closed the book on it and just started working.
What about the mental versus physical? You were an Ironman. Your knee was the one weak spot, but you could just crank. You had an enormous distance base in addition to interval or tempo running and that stuff. You ran an enormous amount of miles. So the mental toughness, where did that come from? And how much of that do you think was key to you, maybe different than genetics and your willingness to train? What's the mix there for you?
I think it was instilled in high school. Coach Rodriguez and Coach Al prepared us physically, and in that, it prepared you mentally before races. They were huge motivators in terms of convincing you that you're prepared to run this. And if anybody's going to beat you, they're going to have to outrace you. And so they prepared you really mentally for running. I had talked with Mike Durkin and talked with a number of other people in high school. And they said, you ground us down and then we're all exhausted and you're taking off sprinting at the end. And I said, if you're going to beat me, it's going to hurt.
Yeah. Similar to the Prefontaine kind of legend and myth, it was the same time, there will be blood.
It's going to be a price to pay.
Yeah, that's great. It's interesting. I wanted to get to some stuff that I have a feeling is not in your realm of experience, but people are always asking me, because then performance enhancing drugs weren't such a well-known thing, and they certainly weren't associated with distance running. But you were on the track team and there were some weight throwers and things. Did you see was that stuff in the realm of the world back then?
Not so much in running. Lassie Viren was the first cheater. He was the first blood dope. They can say what he done. He was doing blood doping. That was the first. There weren't many drug and physical enhancement that way. At least I didn't know of any from a steroid standpoint in running. That would help you. I did see it on the weight side. We had one teammate, he was a big guy. And it wasn't because he was in the weight room all the time.
Yeah, we had a guy, a freshman on my team, came in with me, and he was not really a competitive guy. He couldn't make the C or D team even, but he disappeared over the summer and came back a weightlifter. And we said, oh, you're done running now. Okay, that's all right. And one job I got on work study was the coach said, see all those hurdles all over the track? I need them moved into the corner, and at the end of the summer, I need them put back where they were. What kind of work study job did you have?
I worked with Stanley Johnson. He was the university chaplain. We had our office in Houston Hall, which was the student center. He had an assistant, Mrs. Deutsch, and I was her assistant. I'm working for him for a couple of weeks in what have you. And finally, Stanley's off someplace, and I go to Mrs. Deutsch, and I go, Mrs. Deutsch, I come and I sit here for my hour and a half and chat with you, and I'm organizing some stuff for you. What's my job? And she goes, oh, you've got a really important job, because if I'm not here, you have to be in charge of the office. So I go, well, Mrs. Deutsch, have you ever missed a day of work? No, I've never missed a day of work, but that was my job.
That's great. What about nutrition? How was the food there? And did you think about nutrition apart from that one unfortunately timed meal that got you a stitch? Did you think about nutrition at all? Was that part of training?
It was early on in running where the diet didn't play the role that they do now. University of Pennsylvania has a phenomenal track program now from a facility standpoint, as well as nutrition and training and treatment. If we got injured, they put some tape on you and said, go off and limp. Now they have cold therapy and everything else, what have you. They have a phenomenal training facility that for pre-running and after running as well. And they have a dietitian that really helps coordinate your diet. We had a training hall, but it was really just basic food. Again, you'd have pasta before a race or something else, just to the carbo load was the only real training that we did at diet-wise.
So you got to run on tartan tracks back in high school even, and some other surfaces, no doubt, and cinders along the way. And we didn't have super shoes. We didn't have nutrition. Your times stack up still pretty well. Your high school times stack up pretty well. Do you think if that stuff had come earlier, everybody, of course, would have been elevated the same?
The same, right.
Yeah. So it says that's not the secret sauce to winning. That might be secret sauce on the clock to make a difference there.
The shoe technology today is a huge difference. A bunch of friends and I, Elton Fikes, went to an indoor meet, and Penn had a number of runners right around 4 minutes. One ran 3:59, one ran 4:01, one ran 4:03 and 4:04. The 4:04, I had Tom Murray, Billy Huntley. We had a number of guys that were right around 4 minutes. The 4:04 miler now is a 4 minute, is a 3:59 miler. The shoe technology is a second per lap.
Yeah.
And so the coach, Steve Dolan at Penn, kind of chided Dylan Throop, who is a 10,000 meter record holder at Penn now. He said, well, you're really going to have to drop it down 25 seconds lower than what it is currently, because of the shoe technology. He said, in today's shoes, you're getting a second a lap with the technology. And Dylan did. Yeah. He wound up running, I think, 28, 25.
It's interesting with the list everybody wants to make of being a 4 minute miler. How many more now are making it with it? It's not the same bar as it was back then. Yeah.
No.
When I talked with Marty LaCourie, a thing that I realized looking at some data, but right before I talked to him, as I said, he was the 25th U.S. person to run a 4 minute mile when he broke the time in high school.
Wow.
When I talked to him, 25 high schoolers had done it.
Yeah.
So what I want to talk about the relationship or the rivalry between Villanova and Penn, because it was such a big thing. Villanova was just such a powerhouse, and you guys beat them. How much of that was motivation apart from everything else you got to do all season? They're still Villanova.
Right. Two things. In a distance program, the 71 team, as I said, we finished third in the nation. Villanova finished fourth. They were returning champions from the year before. So it was a pretty impressive accomplishment to run at that level, what have you. Turn the pages to 1976. I hated running against Villanova because they had 𝐩𝐴𝐚 and company always made me train with the distance guys. And I said, our distance medley team was the second fastest in indoors, what have you. If you're going to make me run the anchor on the distance medley, at least let me train for the mile. Because I was running against 𝐩𝐴𝐚, and 𝐩𝐴𝐚 would just sit there, follow me along, and then just blow me off. I could run 4 minutes for a mile, but 𝐩𝐴𝐚 could run 3:56, 3:55 at a whim. And so I'd go to Tup and I said,
another thing I think I heard about was the way your high school trained. It was not so traditional. The distance guys didn't go off necessarily by themselves, and the sprinters go off by themselves. How was that mix done?
As I mentioned, in high school, I was really fortunate because I had some really great teammates as distance runners, but I had phenomenal teammates that were 400 guys and 800 guys. So they were great training partners for me because I'd chase them. I wasn't as fast as they were, and they could beat me. I ran 50.8, I think, in high school. But we had 4 guys that were under 50 seconds in high school. We ran 3:16 and on my relay way back in 69, 70. But I was really fortunate that I had these guys to train with. And Al Logston was way before his time. He was doing the technical training that they're doing now way back then. We were really fortunate as a high school team that we were trained better than we out-trained a lot of people. We ran smarter back then. Because Coast integrated a lot of interval and tempo work into distance running. So we go off for our 10, 12-mile runs, but we would have mile surges on our distance runs, and we'd have quarter-mile surges where you were going all out on a distance run. A coach's philosophy was you were emulating a race situation of you're in a race, and you just put the hammer down for as long as you can and see if anybody goes with you.
Curious, I wonder how he learned this stuff.
He read a lot of books on Lydiard back then.
It sounds like some of the Percy Cerruti workouts, and that's great to have that access to that through that time. What I want to then talk about the relationships with your Penn teammates. Life's life, your knee's your knee. You shut it down and I'm doing something else now. And that wasn't uncommon for the Villanova guys until maybe Marty LaCour, Jumbo would say to him, all right, you had a good career. Go get a job. Go live your life. Yeah. And that's, you would have fit that mold and approach the things. And it wasn't so much a choice for you. What about the relationships you made with the team, and some of those guys kept running? How has that continued over the year, and how much are you in touch with those guys?
I'm pretty close with them. We had a phenomenal team, 71. 76, we had a really strong team. Our 4x1 mile set the American record at the Penn Relays. So we had 4-minute milers. Villanova, of course, beat us with Eamon on the end. I still see him today. We get together every summer at Billy Huntley's house in New Jersey. So.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I had Julio on here, and he did have a long coaching career. What path did your working career take you in terms of where you've lived after you were down there in southeastern Pennsylvania?
I stayed in the Philadelphia pretty much afterwards. A really interesting scenario I started working with right after Urban Outfitters was on Penn's campus. It started on Penn's campus. It was called the Free People Store, and it was up on 42nd, 43rd Street across from the Acme. So I knew the owner, and I wanted to stay around. I was thinking about trying to run again. So I said, I'm going to stay around college and we'll see what happens. So I was working with Dick. I became his operations manager after a couple of years. I never did start training again because I started to train and my knees swelled up, and I said, it's the final chapter, you're done. And again, when you're injured, running's not fun. And so I trained for a couple months and started to break down, and I just said, I'm not going to go through this anymore. I actually did during that. Right afterwards, I went down to Florida. Dr. 𝐑𝐮𝐬 did knee surgery on me and Achilles tendon surgery. And he came back and said, you've got bone spurs on your heel. You're never going to get over these. So I came back, and that was pretty easy to shut the final chapter. So I'm working at Urban Outfitters, and I really didn't like retail that much. I was going around for Dick Hayne, who's the owner. I'm looking at future locations, what have you. And so Dick comes to me finally. I said, I had an accounting degree. I'm going to go into accounting at the bank. So Dick says, I'll give you 5% of the company if you stay with the company. And it was $1.8 billion. I'm going, yeah, that's probably a dumb decision. But
that's great. I want to talk about this off-ramping. You had I don't know if it was easy, but certainly a clear choice with ending your running career. You did look at it a little bit more. You've stayed in touch with your teammates. How about being a fan of the sport? Did you separate? Was there psychologically a thing to let go there, or have you been a track and cross country fan?
Closed the chapter on it, and I did follow it and followed some people that I stayed close to. I followed Craig's career because he ran against him, but I was pretty good friends with him. He was an Illinois friend all through college, then afterwards. I was really fortunate. One of my other teammates was Dave Walters, who went on to be a United Airlines captain. Walt's still running today. He was phenomenal. I was cross-country and 2-mile champion. Craig Virgin was for 2 years. Dave Walters from my high school was then state champion after Craig Virgin. We were still putting out some pretty good people. Dave went on to run with Craig at the University of Illinois. 1980 Olympic trials for the marathon. Wally got down to, I think, 2:16, 2:15 back then. And I think holds the age group record for, I think he's 70. He still runs 2:50, 2:51.
Wow.
for a marathon.
Yeah.
Although he's finally breaking down and getting some injuries, so he knows what I went through. It's funny because he called me and said, if this is what you went through, it's terrible, because he's now beginning to have some injuries that are getting in the way of his training. So
5 decades later. Yeah. But
yeah,
yeah, that's the interesting thing. Maybe Walter's such an outlier lasting that long, but we all go through it at some point, either from injury or just aging change. There's some mercy in not getting slower, which some of us had to face.
right. And my high school coach, Al Logston, has retired. I think Al was way before his time. I was really fortunate to have my first coach, Joe Rodriguez, was a good coach because he beat the crap out of us. We out-trained everybody.
Was he a drill sergeant?
He was a Marine. He was a military guy.
Okay.
So it's a little pain's good, a lot more is better. But Al was a tactician. Al was the one that really philosophized on training philosophy and racing philosophy.
I'm not familiar with what happened at Penn there afterwards. What about your relationship with Reverend Stanley?
I stayed close with him for a long time. He was a huge track team supporter. He'd ride it. Stanley would hop on our training bus with us, and he'd go out to Belmont Plateau with us, what have you. He was a longtime supporter of Penn athletics and Penn track.
Yeah. Thinking back on what we just talked about here, the one thing that came out was maybe a subtext or connotation when we talked about drugs, and you said laissez-faire, and second word out of your mouth was he was a cheater. And so it's pretty clear what your attitude was on that. And are you paying any attention to what's going on now today? It's just headline after headline that a lot of the African athletes, for financial motivation or just misguidance, there's quite a bit going on that we're losing athletes to drug violations.
I've got a group of buddies that at Penn, and we've talked about this in terms of the role that performance enhancement is really in the track world now. And that's one, that shoe technology is one thing you can argue over and something else, but the pharmaceutical advantage is also there now. And there are people who do it. So
it's unfortunate. Yeah, it's not going to help the sport at all.
Yeah. No, it's frustrating because track used to be such a pure sport because I say it's a pure sport because you had to train to do it. On basketball or baseball or something else, what have you, there's ability that you can outperform somebody. But in track and field, you've got to put the work in or the results aren't there.
Yeah, Frank Shorter said, yep, you're not getting there in good looks. Yeah.
Nope, exactly. Yep.
Okay. You got your orthotics.
Yes.
What about the medals and trophies and things? Are you somebody who likes to see that when you had to make the cut? Do you still have that stuff? Is it visible or?
Well, it's interesting because several years ago, my mom sent me a box of stuff from high school and what have you. And then when I graduated, I took everything home, put it in the attic, and it stayed there for 50 years. And several years ago, and I've moved it several times. And my wife finally sat there and said, "You've moved that, how many times now?" So I threw them away, 4 or 5 years ago now. It's funny because Dave Walters, this guy from Illinois, asked if I still had something, what have you. I had it. I saw it a couple of years ago, and sure enough, I threw it away. I'd thrown something away. It was the Junior Olympic, 1970 Junior Olympic medal. He would come over to my house, and he remembers seeing it. And he goes, "You have an Olympic medal?" I said, "I do have it. Where'd it go?" And I said, "It's in the trash."
Okay, that was then, and this is now. It's great to spend time with you now, Dave, and sharing all those memories. And congratulations on the specific accomplishment and the people that you interacted with, and sad for them that you most of the time beat to the finish line.
I was very fortunate to have had the coaching that I had. Extremely fortunate to have the teammates that I have because they've been teammates. They've been friends of mine for life. The running world is a very unique world. It's a very friendly world. You're a runner. It's a wonderful community to be part of. So I've always enjoyed it. And we do it at Penn. They've got a phenomenal facility now at the universities. A bunch of us are going to a couple of their indoor meets coming up. And we get better with time. So
yeah, we get faster, better, and just as good looking now.
Exactly. Right. We all wear hats to cover that up. Right.
Yeah. But I think you put it precisely that is something that we all share is the relationships that we made. So many of them are things that last our entire life and decades and bring a smile. Even if they're people we're not in touch with day to day or month to month, there's still those good memories. And
my wife made that comment. She said, it's really interesting because, from distance running buddies to sprinters and something else. He said, you'll meet these guys after not seeing them for several years, and you guys pick up like it was yesterday that you were having this conversation. It's a wonderful community. So
that gets me another one. Did it ever come up at work? Did anyone ever know who you were or ask about running, or how often over the years, way out of the running environment, has it ever come up? And
I was pretty discreet. I was pretty low keyed about it. I really appreciated the opportunity to perform so well, but I've always been pretty humble about it. My high school coach taught me to be. He said, you know what, be humble today because you might not be in that situation later on. It's interesting when I would come across people later in life in terms of they ask you about different times or something else and said, yeah, I ran 2:18 for a marathon. They're going, you ran what? you can hardly walk across the room now without hobbling. I said, it was a different time.
yeah, it's interesting. It's really nice to spend time with you, Dave. You are humble, and maybe that's how you could tolerate the pain, or maybe that's what pain does to us. It humbles us.
It rounds you out. Exactly. It reminds you what you could be. I just came across it. I think Walt sent it to me. I have a picture from high school where Tom Hale is right behind me. The race after the state 2-mile race that I was going to race him. And I said, I'll wait for that race to try it. So I have a picture from that one.
What do you think you would have gotten on the 2 mile if you would have, on your best day, and maybe you were peaking at that state senior track meet? What was within reach of you for the 2 mile?
I think 8:40. I had trained and I had done a lot of speed work getting ready for the state mile. I had the distance and I had the endurance for the 2 mile. So Coach Al really focused on Mike Durkin.
Yeah.
Because I knew Craig was a 9-minute 2-miler as a sophomore. So I wasn't worried about him. I ran 8:48 and just coasted the entire way. So I looked at it in terms of, I was ready on that day to smoke. But again, 4:07 for the mile wasn't bad.
Thanks for all your time, Dave. It's been
all right,
great.
Matt.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Dave.
All righty, Matt.
Bye.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed another episode. Do you have someone you'd like to hear interviewed on the podcast? You can leave a comment on the YouTube channel or on the website, running70s.com. That's running70s.com. Let me know what you think of the episodes and anyone, including yourself, you'd like to hear interviewed. I hope you enjoyed another episode of Running in the 70s. Voices, stories, and memories of athletes who were running in the 70s. Until next time, wherever you are, keep looking forward and don't forget to look back.